restaurateurs are highly skeptical at the best of times, which is good. It keeps you on your feet. 2 years ago, we were mostly working with SMB mid-market in the UK. Now we're working with like the full-time, some of the largest chains in the UK, Ireland, now the US market that we've entered. You have to have the understanding of the business model and the operations and the nuance to make sure you're building something that can be really effective on the ground, not in theory, in reality.
Today we're going to have with us Conor Sheridan, founder and CEO of Nory. Nory is an AI native operating system for the restaurant industry. It has raised over $60 million to date, has circa $5 million in annualized revenue, and close to 300 clients. And this is the Samay Pata Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Samay Pata Podcast. Today we have with us Conor Sheridan, CEO and founder of Nory.
Great to be here, Luis. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Conor, your background is really interesting, and I think it's one of the reasons why we fell in love with the investment opportunity when we first analyzed Nory. Going from finance to the restaurant industry to building the operating system for the restaurant industry. So, tell us a little bit more about how that path evolved over time and what were the learnings that took you to where you are today.
Yeah, interesting journey looking back. I think you can connect the dots only from the future, right? I started off in kind of strategic consulting and then moved into quantitative finance. So like doing like automated fund management for some big asset management companies in Ireland, and really enjoyed that, right? Got to build a good set of skills around like how to detect signal from noise and be really probably strong with data analytics numbers. You're trying to like predict pricing, which never really works out, but you're trying to have like a really informed view on the market and opportunities. But I loved hospitality. So I worked in hospitality in high school, in university. And when I was on my trading desk, every day I just have like one of the screens opened up like franchise opportunities from the US or from the UK to Ireland, going, could I open up something as like a passive investment just to get me a little bit more excited than I was really at the time. So Ireland's a bit of a time warp, right? It's a small country and an island on like the side of Europe. So there's a really good arbitrage opportunity commercially. It's like a business 101 book. Where do you open a barbershop in the town where there's no barbershops? So a lot of people have been successful in Ireland taking concepts or versions of concepts from the US or Europe or Asia to Ireland a few years before it becomes like hyped up or super popular. So I was looking at different kind of restaurant opportunities.
But instead of opening a Subway, which would have been the normal decision, you decided to open a brand new concept.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was just because of control, I think, like creative control and entrepreneurial control. You can get a concept, but it wouldn't really feel like it was mine. Yeah. And you have to operate within the limits of doing that. And that's great for a lot of people. But I found when I was digging into it and meeting these brands, it didn't excite me as much as going, hey, wait, there's a whole category here that's untapped and you can have a big swing at it. So I decided to go with Mad Egg, which was Ireland's first fried chicken sandwich restaurant, which is like not too dissimilar to like a bougie Chick-fil-A, if you want to put it like that. So that was the business. And it was fantastic. So we opened that in 2018. Kind of immediate product market fit because there was nothing else in the country like it. So we were able to open our second restaurant in 4 months, our third restaurant in 11 months, and start to grow that.
And then the complexity begins, no?
Yeah. So I was going to get to is like you start to add more people, more buildings, they're geo-dispersed. You start to just have less oversight. You can't be in the details as much. In restaurant business, they're so fast moving. From a customer experience point of view, but from a financial, operational, even like a margin point of view, you can start to lose control quickly. And depending on who you have in the restaurants, excuse me, the control over the P&L or the control over the experience could be really variable. And that really freaked me out because you'd put great people in the restaurant. The industry has high turnover rate. You lose them quite quickly. It's 100% in some restaurants. So we found that our margins were varying quite a lot. And coming from an industry where you're given unbelievable tooling in terms of to serve you up analysis, give you the data when you need it, really help you like manage to numbers and metrics, it just didn't exist in in the restaurant space, we looked out to market for technology and we were really underwhelmed. There was a lot of tools to do the jobs on, but there was nothing that made sense of the noise to give to a 25-year-old manager managing a €2 million restaurant to say, hey, do this, manage the business like this. This is what you need to do today. And I couldn't believe that because I was getting that in the trading desk. But when you went into the restaurant, just fires everywhere.
I remember trying to solve a similar issue myself in a way less sophisticated manner than you ended up doing.
Yeah, you told me.
But yeah, it's sometimes difficult when you come from a numbers kind of industry to enter the restoration industry, which is such a human business, right? Like it's a human management business, and not having the numerical tools to really direct your efforts is quite astounding to me. So I felt the need for sure. I wish I had met you a few years before.
Yeah, like you'd be so surprised, even if you go around Madrid here or Dublin or London or New York, so many busy restaurants that are busy fools. They're busy, but there's nothing on the bottom line. Because even though there's people in the building, it's just not being managed properly, which is one of the only industries that I've seen that. I think it's just to complexities, but also the archetype of the people. They are people. Yeah. They're not data people, finance people. It's not typically the background of someone who's operating.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you decide to start the prequel of Nory, like the internal product that you built for Mad Egg? Do you address it kind of like a project in its own? Do you hire people to help you build the product? How do you come up with that, and how does that product evolve into what it is today?
Yeah, a really good question. So initially it was myself with the really basic V0, right? These were like demand prediction algos, very simple algorithms to say like, how many guests do we think we're going to get today? How much revenue? Analyzing day parts. So you could effectively serve up to the team to go, we think we'll make €1,000 in this period with this many guests. Yeah. So that was super basic, or you're putting some macros together, kind of pulling together numbers there, and then you're doing really simple staff computation to go, okay, based on this many guests or numbers, here's how many people we should staff. Based on our previous usage of product and what we're selling on the menu, here's what we think we'll need to prepare or order. Yeah. So they were like simple in my mind in terms of computations. And then the challenge I actually found then was you're building all of that in like a hodgepodge of basic UI or spreadsheets and these things that the Complexities is serving up the answers to the people to get the context and understand the output, to use it. It wasn't like getting to the answer so much. You can get to a basic part of that. So I spent a lot of time on the ground trying to coach the people around, this is what this number means and how you use it. And then quickly I started to go around to other restaurants and I was like, how are you solving this? And like, we're not, we'd love to be able to solve this. And I was like, okay, pull that thread. And that was like mom and pop shops, say 4 or 5 venues like myself. Then you start to meet other people who have maybe 100 venues. I was going around the UK market quite a lot. And they were like, we can't solve this. We're trying to do it centrally. We have a team that will like demand plan, we'll set labor models. We have to check in all the time. One business, I think it was 120 venues, said they had someone who just called around every day to make sure everybody was using the right forecasting figures. And I was like, this is just super broken as like a node in the way to run the business. And that got me excited, right? Because it wasn't just small businesses like me. There was really large businesses here that were operating really inefficiently, but compounded like many times over. Yeah. So taking that initial traction, the feedback loop we were getting from the market, I approached a couple of accelerators. There's one in Ireland, Dogpatch Labs, which is like our version of Station F or YC, and got accepted into that at that time. And that was like the week, or it was mid-pandemic, so it was remotely done, which they were kind of like you're selling solutions to restaurants that are all closed. It's like they need it now.
Sounds like a great time.
Exactly. Your timing couldn't be better. But I was like, just to say, like, this industry's not going anywhere. It's such a huge industry. They're under more pressure now than ever. It's the right time to build, and they're more keen to speak to you because they need help. Yeah. So they were leaning in. Restaurants were leaning in to talk to me, even pre-product, to go, yeah, look, we'd love to be part of design partnerships and things like that. So I went through that accelerator. that was super formative. Started out just being myself, which is a lonely place in an accelerator. There's teams there, and like luckily, like the restaurants were doing pretty well. So and there's good cash flow coming from them. So I was able to use that to bootstrap to start to hire people. So hired the first couple of team members to lead like product, engineering, design. So we got up to maybe 4 to 5 team members. Some of which are still in the business today, and we look back at that time as being super scrappy, but it did that. And we just started building from there, right? It was one piece at a time. We actually started out initially just building all of the algos, and the initial idea was, okay, look, we can't build this huge operating system overnight. We'll die, right? We don't have enough money or time to do this. So how do we build something valuable that we can prove some of our hypothesis that we can drive margin? Because like the focus from day one to today was we can really materially increase your operating profit or your net margin. So we needed to prove that hypothesis, to prove that there was a business. So we built the initial algorithms, and we started to like hack into other products via open APIs or APIs that were not so open for people to say that we want to shoot in suggestions. So shoot in like demand planning, shoot in ideas about resource optimization for staffing or on the product prep and ordering side. And that worked really well and got people really excited. They were like, we'd love to do this. We had a bunch of people sign up. We were able to prove that hypothesis that we could drive productivity and margins in decent sized businesses. So businesses with 10 million plus turnover. So we'd done that at the very start. But quickly we realized that these businesses are going to block us. Like the partnerships and the ecosystem are see us
strategically. They hold the client. And so they're going to try and make sure that they can keep you away from their hands, no? Yeah,
and it was just going to be such a hard thing to scale that we quickly said, okay, we can drive a ton of value here. The ethos behind the business of making it more efficient, more intelligent, and driving the margin makes sense, but we're going to need to build and own the workflows, the data gravity, and the account gravity to build something really big. And that's a scary place to be because you're going, okay, now we need to build an entire operating system, which needs a lot more capital, needs a lot more time, there's a lot more complexity involved. And that's how we went to decide to build what Nory is today.
That's super interesting because like, when people say operating systems and it's a word there or like a phrase that is used quite generalistically in the tech industry, right? Nory really is an operating system. It's a ton of features, very distinct from each other, right? So how do you prioritize this product roadmap? How do you decide which feature needs to come first, which one is most necessary right now for your current group of clients?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Think about the business and the products from a financial standpoint, obviously from my background. So I think about like a P&L, obviously not only, but you think about sales, COGS, workforce to contribution margins, so your top prime costs, and then your overheads. Our initial lever was, our initial area to own was prime costs because it's 60 to 70% of turnover of the business. If you can get control of that and manage that effectively, you can have a healthy, profitable business. If you can't, your business is going to fail and it's going to close. Yeah. So from a prioritization point of view, we said what goes into the prime costs and running a restaurant to get you to that operating profit. And then you're working back to go, okay, you need to own the guest journey, revenue management. You need to own COGS, which is your menu, your supply chain, your inventory, and then you need to go down to your workforce, which is your labor. And what goes into that is how do you hire people, how do you retain people, engage people, because turnover is obviously high cost, but then how do you deploy your resources effectively to make sure that they're productive. So we always work back internally to go, what is the ROI to our partner on a P&L? So if we take one of our restaurant partners' P&L or our roadmap, if we can't tie a line somewhere along the strategy or the PRD of a feature or a module to this is going to increase the profitability of this business here, it won't get through, because ultimately that is the North Star of the business, is to drive that margin, and everything we build has to tie back to doing that in some way, whether that's directly through automation, directly through intelligence to actually guide people to run the business better, or indirectly through things like losing less staff because they're more engaged because the cost of replacing is so high. Everything has to come back to that kind of financial metric.
If you're optimizing for your customers, all right, that doesn't always translate apples to apples into Nory's ROI for a product feature. So how do you balance those two aspects?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, I think when we look at like how we package or price the product, or we look at what is the first and foremost is give the value, give insane value to the business, that drive 10x outcomes, make sure you can drive profitability. And if you can do that materially and measure it and be really, really direct to it, then you have a much easier way to package it and price it. There's many ways to like skin a cat, as they say. You can do it on usage, you can do it on transaction, you can do it on a SaaS fee. You can look at it as a multiple or a percentage of the P&L, and you can package it like that. So I think we've followed that road today to go, if we can materially tie what we're building to the P&L accurately, whether that's from a reduction in headcount or labor cost or driving margin, we're in a good place to be able to package that to extrapolate the value back. And the strategy as well is we don't want to just be in a SaaS line on a P&L, because that's a busy place to be. So if you can drive value all across from, like I mentioned, the prime cost down to the overheads, like we've now launched back office products that enable people to remove payroll functions, procurement functions, these kind of things that you're now working through the business systematically and providing value in so many different lines that then you can price systematically through that. So we tried to balance it, right? Focus on the customer value first, but of course you can, you have to be able to package it to get the right value back for us.
So in order to like better explain what Nory is, like what does Nory do today? What is it capable of doing today for its clients?
Yeah, so we are a simple way, like a back of house operating system, if we want to put it like that. So we manage everything from the door in of a restaurant and then back into the head office. So that would be the revenue that comes through the point of sale. We would connect into that, or the front office tools that you might see when you go to a restaurant, like kiosks or payments. We ingest the data into there, and then we manage the operational areas of the business around COGS. So how you engage with suppliers, how you manage your kitchen, what food you prepare, order, kind of recipe management to make sure you're profitable and that's as automated as possible. We manage all things to do with your people, hiring, onboarding, performance management, engagement, staffing, HR, payroll. So you have like everything to do with your food and your people, which are the most important things in a restaurant and are the heart of the business. You manage in Nory. Initially we started in the restaurant, so the operations and financial flows, and now over time we've done things like I mentioned, offering payroll, which is more managing capital flows. We've now started lending capital products. So
financing solutions, which are critical for the restaurant industry to grow.
Yeah, and it's such a tough place to get capital because you're an assetless business. So you're getting lending on cash flow, which is not what people want to do. And the cash flows can be really inconsistent. And because we have all of that workflows and data in Nory, we have a live P&L and we have predicted P&L all the way out. And we're trying to make it better. So we can quickly pre-approve people because we know what their net margins are going to be and what the payback likelihood is, and get them capital in a really short amount of time for lending. So we have a bunch of like large businesses in particular who just have revolving facilities to open more venues, and they'll just tap into it as they go.
And I guess, I mean, we live in the era of AI, and AI is quite part of core for Nory. I guess more machine learning at the beginnings, but in today's product, there's a significant layer and a roadmap of product development in generative AI. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, from day one, our initial marketing pitch or go-to-market pitch was the AI restaurant manager from literal day zero. And we actually had to suppress that a bit in, say, 2021, 2022, pre-ChatGPT, because the industry is a people industry, quite traditional, the restaurant space. And we were getting a bit of negative feedback to go, we don't want to have an AI manager in the business. We want a human manager, and we want tools for them to do the work. So we had to actually suppress it a little bit. But our core ethos from day one was, how do we build like an omniscient AI assistant that can manage a bunch of sub-assistants in different workflow areas to help you run the business more effectively. So you have an always-on workforce to manage things like a supply chain journey and automate that. So you wake up one day, you know the jobs are done, or manage things around demand planning, or manage things around payroll. So, or FAQs on the HR side. If team members are worried about something, there's always on assistance. That was the vision. But the technology wasn't quite there. So we really focused initially on deep learning, machine learning models. So how do we get to specific outcomes, really around like resource optimization, were like the kernel of it. And that can be quite a black box. Drove a lot of value early on, but you're giving like a singular output going, do this, or this is the number, or this is the end state in terms of the action. And now we've seen like a huge unlock with generative AI. So if you add like deterministic models like that, and then a probabilistic model or these LLMs, we're in a place now where we can unlock a lot of explainability into what happens in the underlying algorithms, but we can also give the orchestration to non-technical users so they can engage with our models or algorithms on a predictive basis and say, hey, what happened? Do scenario analysis or change this input and give me that output, where previously you'd have to be tinkering with that or trying to put in some reinforcement learning bias into the model. So for us, that's a huge unlock. And then even beyond that, so we see that's where our mode is. How do you get really deep expertise in really hard, complex algorithms that are to drive business productivity? And then how do you overlay that with those orchestration layers? And the two of them combined are really hard to kind of displace or make you, and they can make you quite entrenched because they're deeply vertical on the specific data set that you own as well. So we're really excited about that. But there's a bunch of other things. Like I think we started to launch this brigade of autonomous assistants we mentioned just there. So how do you have these always on workers that are speaking to guests, understanding what's happening in the business, engaging teams in HR queries to make sure that you have high NPS, people are engaged, try and check for staff churn. So what are the signals someone might leave the business? There's a bunch of other use cases that we weren't even considering before that have now been unlocked that we're super excited about.
And have the clients finally realized that this is not Skynet?
Yeah, for sure. I think the whole industry has done a 180. In the last 18 months, I can't believe how much they're leaning into AI and leaning into want to adopt it. Part of that is the pain and the pressure. It's the macro environment of running a restaurant today. The inflation is just going up and up and the costs are going up and up. So there's a bit of we need to do something or else we're going to be in trouble from an operating model. But the excitement and the want to know what's out there and what it can do for the business is at like a peak levels at this point. So, but there's always a healthy level of distrust. I think that's a good thing. You have to have a healthy level of skepticism. There's so much AI marketing, and some of it is just like crap, right? If you go in and you have really simple rules-based models, or you have things that are just not even models at all, right? So I do think that restaurateurs are highly skeptical at the best of times, which is good. It keeps you on your feet. I think it's the right thing to do in any industry at this point, is to be quite skeptical about the claims that are being made.
Yeah, we were talking the other day about the AI deployment gap, no, and like how to bridge this gap with deployment-oriented delivery models, right? And we've seen companies do this forward deployed engineer kind of presence in their go-to-market teams. You address it. It's kind of a similar role, but you address it slightly different. Can you give the audience a little bit more color on this?
Yeah, 100%. So we're serving across SMB to enterprise. That could be, I don't know, 2 to 5 restaurants as an SMB, 250 to 500 as an enterprise, right? They're quite different businesses. The problem sets they're trying to solve at the individual restaurant level are the same, but the complexity is different. You might have multiple brands, tens of thousands of employees, a lot of stakeholders to manage. So you just need to treat it a bit differently. I think there's more of a out-of-the-box product solution at SMB that works well for the masses, like an 80-20. But we found that in order to deploy the product and deploy a lot of the algorithms and a lot of the models effectively, there's an element of co-creation there, right? You have to have the understanding of the business model and the operations and the nuance to make sure you're building something that can be really effective on the ground, not in theory, in reality. But also you get the buy-in from the change management approach of the leaders to say, we've co-created this and it needs to land. So what we've done is forward deploy data scientists effectively. So what we do is we land in our data science team, who are incredible, and they come in and do a full business analysis, even pre-sale, to go, here's where your business is at. Here's how it's pacing from a revenue point of view. Here's how accurate you are at predicting that revenue. Here's where your leakage is in terms of how you're deploying your staff or how you're managing your gross margin. Here's the opportunities out of your 200 restaurants where we think we can pull this up. And you're giving people like a consulting artifact to go, okay, take that away and go work with somebody else if you want, or work with us. And here's the big number that we think we can get to if we go on this journey. That's step one. And then we deploy into the business and work with them to take that theory into practice, to start to land those models into the business. You iterate to make sure that they're landing effectively and they're driving the value that you expect. And then you look to go roll out. I think that's important, right? Because there's that article that was mentioned from MIT that everyone keeps referencing to go 80% of people want to launch a AI pilot, 5% are seeing success. And it's not a silver bullet, right? I think that deployment gap that you just mentioned, there is that co-creation element and there's a service element to it, particularly at enterprise, that you need to work hard on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for the type of client that you serve, where it's location based, so one client has multiple locations, the deployment schedule between those locations probably is like phased out, right? Or like into they start with a smaller sample, they test it, then they move on to a bigger sample or full deployment. No, so how do you try and close that timeline to make it as short as possible?
Yeah, I think we look at it from how do you deploy it to make sure it lands as effectively as possible. So that's where you start to go, what are the risks? What do we need to prove out to make sure this can land? Because the worst case scenario is you go too quickly, it lands in, it's a mess, and then it gets rolled back, right? But you also want to do it at pace. Nobody wants to be in deployment purgatory in this constant change.
Time to value
it's huge.
It's huge. And
we put a lot of resourcing into that because we don't want to be another enterprise software company that spends 2 years rolling out a piece of software to a business. It's not in our interest. It's not in the client interest. So we try to go, okay, what do we need to prove? So for example, if I've got 500 restaurants, I might start with a sample set of 10 or 15, and I'll say, okay, give me a lot of layers of complexity here. Restaurants that are trading well, trading poorly, restaurants that are productive, unproductive, restaurants that have hopefully usually engaged teams, because that very alpha stage is really important to get the wheels moving. And you might spend a number of weeks there to show like how you're deploying the system, how it's driving outcomes, and then quickly you want to get to maybe 10% of the estate, right? So 10% is like the initial baseline figure of 50. And after that, you've proven that there's enough extrapolation at that level to get to deploy this to the rest of the business. And at that point, then it's just phasing, right? It's like, depending on the business, you might want to phase it by region or by sub-brand. And then you'll go, okay, on a rollout phasing, first phase, you might do 250, second phase, you do 250. It just depends, right? Some businesses want to go, particularly on the workforce element, you need to do a bit of a big bang, because you're consuming the capital flows, the payroll, how people get money in their bank, and you don't want to do that in a batchy way. You want to make sure you do that in one go, which forces you to move more quickly, which is positive as well. It means that you can't drip this out forever.
You mentioned you have the SMBs, which are like the 2 to 5 locations, or then you have the very large enterprise, which are hundreds of locations, right? These are two very different ICPs, right? And probably require very, very different go-to-markets. And on the enterprise segment, some customization. How do you navigate all of this complexity in the go-to-market team, and how do you build a go-to-market team up to be able to address this?
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. I think if you're going to be vertical specific and verticalized, which we are, and you want to be specialists in your industry, you need to be able to serve enough of the industry to build a huge business, right? So it's kind of a forcing function of what you have to do, but you need different motions, and it's end to end. We look at Nory like a bow tie. So a funnel bow tie. So from top of funnel, demand gen and brand awareness, through to selection, through to closing, through to onboarding, renewal, expansion, and like a virtuous loop. So we measure that, but we also have our motions done like that. So we have an SMB mid-market motion, which looks broadly the same. Okay. In terms of how we get our name out to brands, how they find out about us, Where they come in with, is it through an inbound channel, which it mostly is on the smaller businesses, or a partnerships channel, for example. And then so you're structuring a team to go, okay, how do we make sure we drive the volume and conversion from an inbound point of view? And then there's a set of reps that will manage, sales reps or account executives that will manage an inbound journey. And it's high velocity. It's more short sales cycles, say 14, 21 days type situation, because these people have figured out they've got a problem. They want to solve it now. They don't want to wait. And then they want to buy, so you need to match the urgency of the buyer. And then even from a deployment point of view, it's how do you get time to value quickly, get them on the product in the next week from signature, and then start to deploy them through. But then also, so you have that one motion and you're measuring that, and you've got from top of funnel how you're managing all the way through to expansion and account management. And then for enterprise is a separate one. So you're effectively going, how are we getting enterprise brands in? There's referrals, there's events, community, outbound. It's a different pod. And then there's a different slipstream, right? You've got enterprise account executives. You've got people who are working on solutions side of it. You've got forward deployed data scientists. The pitch is different. Yeah. We're ultimately trying to solve the same problem though, right? So I think when we go in and we go, here's what we're going to do for your business, we're saying the same thing to both motions, but potentially saying it in different levels of complexity. Yeah. And understanding that one of them needs to go on more of a journey because there's so many more stakeholders. In terms of customization, most of that is typically around integrations in existing architecture for sure. You need to be able to, you're obviously an operating system, but you need to speak to what's been there and what's entrenched in the business for decades. In some instances, we're not going to build everything. So that's a lot of the customization. We've stood up a plug and play team, which specializes in that, specializes in connecting to the ecosystem, because for us,
so calling other tools that can complement yours, basically.
Yeah, 100%. So either embedding them into our product or our offering to make sure it's more consolidated, or just push-pull from a data point of view to make sure that if an action happens in Nory, we're a system of actions, so we're pushing it to somewhere else or we're ingesting it from somewhere else. Like for us to really be we call ourselves a system of action versus a system of record. We need to be able to ingest any data point that is key from an operational or financial point of view, understand it and use it to drive action. Yeah. So that means we need to have an incredible amount of integrations into entrenchment into that business.
Another complexity that arises from having multiple ICPs, I understand that, like, you're absolutely right. Like, you got to be able to touch both to really build a universal kind of like solution, right? But another complexity is retention, right? So when you're clearly driving efforts for a product that is going up market, a lot of companies, a lot of startups that move up market tend to start seeing churn on their smaller clients, right? Their original clients who were like their ICP back then, all of a sudden have less focus on solving solutions for them. They have less capacity to dedicate resources to that smaller ICP. How do you manage that retention of the smaller ICP while continuing to build for larger contracted value in the larger customers?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'd be lying if you said it wasn't a challenge, right? There's a prioritization everywhere. I think what we tried to do is we talk a lot about like real deep empathy for the problem and the industry. 60% of our team have restaurant experience. They're operators, they're GMs, they've run businesses, they've used to own them. So they're deeply entrenched in like the problems these businesses face. And we have what we call internally as like GM love, which is like the restaurant manager love. So you can never forget that you're building tools for the people who are in the middle of the fire on the ground. I think if you can keep that core principle in terms of your product strategy, that you're supporting those people in the front lines, it means that you will cover a lot of what the SMBs need as well as enterprise, because the SMBs are ultimately the owner who's in the front line, maybe not the management pyramid on a larger business. So they're facing similar challenges about what it's like to actually be in the kitchen at midnight, slinging dishes out, dealing with fires, staff who didn't turn up, cash flow tightness. A GM might be managing that in a big enterprise business, but an owner is doing that. And I think if you can keep that principle in terms of how you're building product, it goes a long way for sure. And I think that we're lucky that a lot of the problem set that we're building is not mutually exclusive, right? We're trying to solve the gross margin, the prime cost problem for both sets of businesses. So you don't have a vastly different solution for a smaller restaurant versus a super large restaurant. It's usually just lots more restaurants.
Yeah, fair enough.
But there's definitely a challenge, right? I think that we've seen that as well. You can get roadmap focus, you get pulled from the market. They want things that are more specific, like we talked around the integration side, that are less relevant for smaller businesses. It's constant prioritization, and we argue internally all the time to go which is the better way to go, and it adds a lot of tension. Like we do product back briefs every cycle to go in this cycle. What are we going to build and why? And there's a ton of argument to go. Well, what about this or what about this? And
that's the key aspect of entrepreneurship, no? It's like you're playing with limited resources, and you have to kind of like figure out where to best place them to manage the most positive outcome possible, right? You mentioned this as a challenge. I'd like to touch on this and ask you, what other key challenges do you think are ahead for Nory, or that currently for Nory?
Yeah, really good question. The business is changing so fast. 2 years ago, you guys led our seed round.
Yeah.
We've just closed Series B. 2 years ago, we were mostly working with SMB mid-market in the UK. Now we're working with like the full-time, some of the largest chains in the UK, Ireland, now the US market that we've entered. 2 years ago, AI wasn't disrupting absolutely everything in every category in terms of like time to value, people coming in trying to eat your lunch on that side. And then 2 years ago, we had maybe 18 people on the team, and now you've got maybe 75 odd people, and you're growing quickly. So if you kind of unpack all of those changes in that period of time, there's quite a few, right? We're launching a new market, which we're pumped about. We've launched into the US. We're live in a few states. We're accelerating super quickly around localizing the products as far as we can go, working with awesome brands there. We think that's going to be our kingmaker market in terms of it's the biggest amount of ICP, biggest TAM. We do in the future want to also launch into Europe, and not in too distant future to wider Europe, because we want to be the largest player globally. So there's a internationalization challenge. You're going from 0 to 1 all over again. A year ago, we had an office in London.
You have a product now, at least.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
You have a much more developed product. So that's an advantage, right?
Yeah. No, look, we're excited. We're getting incredible feedback. People are pumped about it in the market. And we can go a lot faster. It's not the same as where we're at. But I just use the example to the team to go, a year ago, we had 2 people in London, and we had a co-working space with 1 desk in it. And I used to bring people to the office in the interview process, and they'd be like, can I see the office? Like, I don't know.
This desk
a single desk. And now we've got maybe 45 people in London, and a buzzing office and a buzzing culture in there. And that's a 12-month period. And you're kind of going, okay, like the lift that had to go in to do that is huge, to break that market, get the density. We're coming up on like 10% of the UKI market for multi-location restaurants. We're getting real dominant position. Yeah. So you have to do that all over again in the US, which is like, gives me incredible energy, but it's a huge challenge, right? Because
normally this is something that requires a lot of your time and dedication, right? Because you want to build the right culture in this new market also, and with the new team, right?
Yeah. And it will, right? So I spent a lot of last year building up or deepening the bench of an incredible leadership team in Europe in terms of covering all the bases there. Gives me huge confidence that I can go and kind of spearhead the Tiger team, or Team USA, as we're calling it internally, that you can do that and stand it up and get people pumped up. Because when you're in that desk, when we're in our single desk in New York with the team, we need to point to the future that this is where it will be in 12 months. Once you believe the process, and let's go after it. Like, so I think it's an element of, it's a founder's responsibility to take the trumpet out and bring everyone along. So I'm pumped for that. That's a big challenge. I think focus as well is a big one. So you're building a broad product that's quite complex in terms of an operating system. You're building for, as you mentioned, different segments of the market, and you're building for different geos. Although there's a lot of like intertwining similarities, there's definitely differences. You're post a funding round where everyone's amped up and wants to go super fast. It can be super easy to try to do too many things too quickly. You spin your wheels, you start to lose velocity, you lose focus. So for me, spending a lot of time trying to narrow the focus and talk about sequencing and sequentiality of bets and what we want to do. And then lastly, I would say on the hiring front, we've grown maybe 100% on the headcount in 12 months. And there's a cultural aspect to that. There's a productivity aspect to that. There's when you add lots of nodes into a team and how they actually speak to each other and are they efficient, and we're making sure. I used to really not like the culture of big businesses where there's meetings to talk about who's going to set the next agenda of a meeting. And you want to make sure you never get there, although maybe it's unavoidable at real scale. So yeah, we have a big focus on, if we're growing the team so much, how do we ramp people quickly? How do we enable them? How do we make sure they're productive?
How do you stay nimble and adaptive?
Yeah, exactly.
No?
Yeah.
When you're thinking about this challenge, and you're starting to prepare yourself for this journey into the US and building this team, what are you looking for? What kind of profiles are you looking for? What is your core team around you of support that you then, the rock that you build on, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think anyone, I get asked this question in every interview. So I do the final round interview with every team member, and do, depending on the role, we'll do obviously a lot more of the stage, but get asked that question by anyone who wants to join, to go, what do successful people at Nory look like? Who performs the best? And typically the behaviors or the patterns or the attributes that we see are really high ambition. If you look at the talent density of our team, they could work for any company in the world, the top 1%.
Yeah.
So I think you want to work with incredible people, because that's a magnet for more incredible people, really ambitious. People who go, I could work anywhere. So if you're not going to swing for the fences and make this a huge outcome in one of the biggest businesses, I'll go somewhere else where the ambition matches mine. And that builds a culture of ambition, which is really important, particularly when you're facing challenges. Yeah. You need belief. Belief is like the number one thing that you need to go, we can actually do this. Yeah. And this piece, there's agency. So when you're a small team and you're kind of David versus Goliath every single day, you need really high agency. So it's like that Keith Raboy piece for barrels and ammunition. So like talks about your business can go as far as the amount of barrels that you have versus ammunition. So people can take things end to end, own it, run with it, make sure you get to an outcome. As many of those people we try to hire is really important, because for me as a founder, I can go to a new market and not be sweating to go, are we looking after all the core parts of the business in Europe, or are we still moving forward? So people who have that agency and that ownership is really important. And then the top two things. And then I think lastly is like an empathy. I go back to the customer. So like, why do you want to work here? Beyond it's growing quickly, and it might be cool to work in a VC-backed company.
And the options might be nice.
Yeah, and they're growing exponentially. So people want to be on that journey. So... Yeah. But you need to have an empathy and a desire to help the space. It's like, if you don't care about the people you're building the product for or selling the product to deeply, you're not going to do something great, because you'll just half-ass it and cut corners because you don't have the understanding or the empathy. So those three things are really important. And if you look on our website or any of our materials, they actually translate into our principles or our values, like in terms of we act like owners, in terms of having like a real deep understanding of the market and how we move quickly in terms of velocity and things like that.
And in terms of team structure or roles, like I guess titles, I know titles are quite irrelevant a lot of times in these early stages of the US business. I mean, right? So when you're starting a team, everyone is doing everything. Everyone wears many hats. But what would be that team structure that you think you need to build on?
Yeah, of course. So we're hiring now pirates and romantics, as we say, the types of people we're looking for. It is a go-to-market motion predominantly in there. We have a world-class product function in Dublin and London that we'll retain. So it's go-to-market, if you think everything from top of funnel through to expansion. So we're bringing in founding AEs, sales manager. We run a key win by key cities motion or key states motion. So obviously we're in a couple of states now, but we're putting a lot of density in New York. The idea is like really good partner ecosystem.
Nice concentration.
Yeah, exactly. And we can get density, get virality. And we saw that in London. We want to replicate that. So we're launching looking for, say, district sales lead to run that region, some founding AEs, head of partnerships, because initially one of the motions we ran in Europe or in the UK was really partnership driven. Like our first million of ARR predominantly came from partners. You're plugging into the ecosystem, you're co-selling. So at an SMB level, we have great partners on the point of sale side, and they'll plug into Nory and sell a value prop of a business in a box. You can work with these two companies and you never need another software provider again. And that's really compelling for them, their sales reps, because they don't have to parse deals to multiple providers and lose to risk them. But also for the client, that you have one or two billing options and one or two platforms. So we have that. And then on the larger businesses, you're partnering with, due to that, like complexity of the business, the forward deployed motion, how we've built out our motion there. So partnerships is key. And then operationally, chief of staff. So for me, I need somebody who can help me in everything, right? You're the chief bottle washer in a new market, so you need to be able to do everything and anything. So it's having someone who's willing to roll up the sleeves. And
chief of staff is my favorite title. It's basically, in Spanish, we call it Pepi para todo, which means like someone that does everything.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredible leverage in that role. And so we're looking for someone there, speaking to people at the moment, and we're excited about it.
Are they U.S. nationals? Or are they local to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to hire a local team for sure.
Yeah, based in New York. Initial team based there, local, in person. Build that culture. Over time, maybe you become more distributed. Yeah. You might have satellite offices and whatnot. But initially, when you're trying to go from 0 to 1 in a new market, being together, sitting around the desk, it's important.
Yeah. You touched earlier on your fundraising trajectory, and obviously I'm well aware, but a little bit for the audience. You've raised over $60 million to date, and in the last round, almost 40, right? So, what do you look at when you fundraise? What do you look at in your investors? What do you think about the capital that's coming in, and how do you plan on putting it to use? So, two very different questions, but start or parse them at your.
Yeah, we'll start with the partnership fit. So it's a partnership, right? It's a commercial agreement. Number one, you are promising or to get an outcome for someone like yourselves and for, say, Excel or Kinnevik or anyone else who joined in the last rounds. You're building a big business. You want to take over a market and be dominant and create great value, but you need to create shareholder value. So you understand that. You need to look at people who line up to that vision. So different funds have different expectations. They have different IRR multiples, probably, right? They have different timelines. So I think that's all really important too. You need to be able to be aligned to go, how big do you want this to be? Does that match our fund return profile? Like, just some semantics there that are actually quite important. And I think I was excited to work with Samapada and Excel and Kinnevik because everybody's aligned on a really big outcome to want to build something really, really large and really go after something ambitiously, which is good. It means that you can have that alignment at a board level to say the decisions you're going to make are going to be to plant the seeds for
take
success.
Some trade-offs for the long term. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's one. There's also then like, okay, what are my next set of milestones on this journey? Because it's a long journey. You need to break it into incremental milestones of new markets, ARR targets. It can be series, but it's probably not the best way to milestone it. It's more like business inflection points. It's like, how best at each stage can this partner help me get to that milestone as quickly as possible? So you look to a partner and say, okay, who are they working with? How many of the businesses have gotten from A to B in terms of graduation rate? What is the feedback from the founders in terms of working with them, in terms of how they've helped them unblock the next stage? That can be a lot of things, right? It can be, how do you get to initial product market fit? How do you get to a Series A? How do you break a new market? How do you go up market? They could be the next inflection points, and you want partners who can help you figure that out. So that's really important as well. And then there's the human element of it, right? Any relationship is like, could you see yourself being stuck in an airport with this person, or going for a beer or coffee with somebody and being able to work through it? Like, are you comfortable to pick up the phone when the shit hits the fan and say, this is where we're at? So that's really probably underappreciated. So they're the kind of three things you look at. There's obviously things around thesis and fund structure and will they follow on and on those things, but they're probably the three main things we looked at when we looked for partners. And then in terms of deployment of capital, it changes for each
round, obviously. For
each inflection point. So like, our next one is obviously building a dominant position in our core markets, becoming the market leader quickly, breaking that US market substantially with substantial traction, and making sure that we firm up our position as the leading AI native player in our space. So you look at like the product and the go-to-market investment, and they're the bets we're taking now.
Thanks, Conor. That was super interesting. Thanks so much for joining us. That's it for today. And
awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.